Earlier this week, there was considerable disruption to scheduled flights into and out of the local airport here in Lagos as Nigerian labor leaders enforced a threat to ground the country's economy over their demand for an improved minimum wage. And with Nigeria still grappling with issues around passenger safety, insurance and protection owing to the continued deployment of sometimes less than adequate facilities, that conversation bubbles to the surface again. We're now being joined by Michael Achimugu, who is Director, Public Affairs and Consumer Protection at Nigeria's Civil Aviation Authority, to look at this matter, as well as the impact of the suspended strike on the aviation industry. Good to have you on Newsday. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon. Let's start with efforts, that have been made to maintain safety and protect passengers in Nigeria's aviation industry. Can you just tell us, what some of those efforts are before we go into the impact of the strike?
Oh, well, owing to the initial picketing of Turkish Airlines by the NLC and then consequently the disruptions caused by the nationwide strike, the NCAA, FAN, and other security agencies had a committee meeting where discussions were had about how to secure the airports. We all know that airports are critical national assets, and of course, measures to forestall against possible violence, were taken. But these measures were told or instructed by the Honorable Minister to make sure that they were non-coercive, and thankfully, the strikers also behaved themselves, carried themselves with peacefully and with dignity. So we thank God that it did not degenerate into, any use of force. However, at all times, security agents, both uniformed and plainclothes, are always available at the airport, going about their duties with due professionalism.
Well, that's very comforting to hear, especially in lieu of the fact that this strike might linger on or kick back up in 1 week's time. What impact do you foresee it having on your agency and the industry? And what is being done to mitigate some of those tough calls that will need to be made?
On a personal note, I think that strikes of this nature should not be affecting our airports. But that's just me speaking. Where it does happen, of course, it's going to lead to a lot of disruptions. There's a backlog of flights, for instance, people who miss their flights on the first day of the strike. Airlines are finding it difficult, normally, to be able to reprotect those passengers, reschedule their tickets, so that they can fly, and for those who seek refunds, to get their refunds. Of course, passengers who travel for business and other reasons and experience these disruptions, and a lot of money is lost each time flights are disrupted, not even counting the inconveniences as well, because there are persons traveling for health reasons as well. So I really think that measures should be taken to prevent airports from being, objects of strikes next time. I'm hoping that the relevant authorities will look into this and perhaps incorporate it into the act if it is not already there. That said, we have managed the situation quite commendably. On the day of the strike, I had summoned all of the local airlines to a meeting virtually, where we discussed how to mitigate the inconvenience to passengers by way of refunds without penalties, protecting them without penalties, reopening their tickets so they can fly any other time without penalties as well. Graciously, the airlines themselves, have agreed without any arguments, because they know that it is not the fault of the passengers, neither is it the fault of the airlines. To also not seem like we are only on the side of the passengers. We did discuss with our sister agency, FAN, to look into the possibility of exempting the airlines from certain charges, especially the ticket sales charges for that day, since it was force majeure, and I must commend the MD FAN as well for graciously looking into it and agreeing, for those reforms to be made, subject to certain conditions.
Well, you talked about passengers, missing their flights due to the strike. But I know that for a fact, most times, or quite a number of times, passengers have missed their flights due to delays by airline. And most times they are not compensated. What is your agency doing about that?
Well, thank you for that question. It's been a very gray spot since I assumed office. Mine seems to be a thankless job. The airlines accuse us of taking sides with the passengers all the time, and the passengers think we're on the side of the airlines all the time. First of all, flight disruptions are a global phenomenon. It's not a Nigerian thing. It happens everywhere. People who live abroad, who travel out of the country as well, will tell you so. It's never going to end, flight disruptions, because there are so many reasons. That is why the NCA regulations part 19 make allowance for things like act of God, weather, force majeure, and technical issues as well. Where these things happen, however, our regulations stipulate the measures that need to be taken. That is why the Consumer Protection Department of the NCAA processes requests for refunds, reprotection, compensation for passengers. We have a 65% success rate in this regard, and it will keep improving. To make the process of lodging complaints easier for passengers and the processing of it, we are launching the Consumer Protection portal very soon, so that we can go fully automated, and then everybody, it's a win-win for everybody. However, I must state that passengers are always talking about their rights and forgetting their responsibilities. And so we see a situation where a large percentage of the complaints that come in, the passengers are complaining because they also did not understand the responsibilities they have. For instance, the regulations say that for local flights, you must be at the airport at least 2 hours before your flight. This is to ensure that your check-in and boarding process goes smoothly, and should there be any unforeseen circumstance, there's enough time to resolve those issues so that you may still fly. But you find passengers who arrive after check-in counters have been closed, still complaining, as though they are right. They have forgotten totally sometimes what their responsibilities are. Also, another instance is where passengers fail to understand the kind of ticket, the conditions, terms and conditions on the tickets they have bought. So many of the complaints we receive, especially for refunds, we find out that the ticket the passenger bought is a non-refundable ticket. And so if you do not understand the terms and conditions of the ticket you have bought, we tend to have some of these complaints on social media. There's one that went viral very recently against an international airline. The person failed to understand that they ought to have secured a consular visa from Nigeria before transiting through a particular country to be able to access the accommodation that was their right. So where passengers fail to understand some of these regulations, it becomes a problem. And so we are inundated with several cases that shouldn't even have come to us in the first place. However, we still do our best. Thankfully, the local airlines on their part are not the only ones responsible for some of these delays. When passengers are angry, it's because they simply want to get from point A to point B. So they do not understand some of these things. I give an example. Today, I want to, on national TV, commend Suleiman Alade, who's your staff. He had called because, his flight was delayed due weather. And he thought at 5 p.m. that the airline owed him accommodation. He had put a call through to me, and I took time to explain the situation to him, that when the cause of delay is weather, for instance, it is force majeure. It is not the duty of the airline to provide you accommodation, especially where it is in the city where you live, and it is not yet 10 p.m. He understood in all fairness to him, he understood this and he took it very gracefully. I asked the airline to call him and the other passengers and provide them comfort of some sort. They did, So I encourage all passengers to take time to study the regulations so that they can know their rights and their responsibilities. For instance, if a plane is already taxiing for takeoff and the pilot discovers a tech issue, the airline has a right to cancel that flight immediately without needing to refund. They can accept where the passenger wants a refund. And also the regulation stipulates that such passengers can be protected if there's available flights on other airlines as well. So it's a work in progress. We continue to put out information and educate the public about our regulations, and so on. We resolve a lot of these cases. It's funny because passengers who come online to complain, when we resolve their cases, they never come back online to give a report. Early hours of this morning, somebody whose case I took up a few weeks ago sent me a message that he had been refunded. I had to beg him. I said, look, since you complained on social media, go back to social media and tell them that this case has been resolved, because it helps boost the confidence of the public in the authority. We are working and we'll keep improving.
You did mention earlier it was a thankless job. I guess this is part of what comes with it. You were talking about the weather and technology. Regarding what's happening around the world with the Boeing 747 planes, we know that there have been some scandals with their equipment malfunctioning. And we also know that the weather has played a part in it. Some say that due to global warming, there are pockets around the world that have created extreme turbulent areas. I'm not sure if Nigeria is included in any of those, but can you speak on the technology that is being used to upmarket the planes to make sure things are more safe, and whether or not global warming and all these discussions that are happening in foreign lands, if they affect us, and if these are the same discussions being had within our sectors concerning the maintenance of our planes and possible any Boeings that we have in our air fleet?
I like to think that I'm not the best person to speak about the technical aspects of aircraft. But what I do know is that most modern aircraft are capable of flying in rough weather, especially when it's raining. But sometimes, as with all man-made things, because even God-made things experience issues every once in a while. It's why man falls sick and even gets to die. And so, like with all mechanical things, planes can develop sudden, unforeseen, fault. Like the Air France that conveyed Nigerians through Chad very recently, last week, which issue also went viral. There was heavy weather, and the plane was damaged. It's why they could not proceed to Abuja on the same day as scheduled. When these things happen, I think that countries are able to discuss with the makers of these planes, and where the technical personnel of the CAA advise properly, a nation may decide, look, we do not want this particular set of planes flying in our country. But as of this moment, there aren't such serious issues occurring in Nigeria that will call for to stop the continued use of a particular aircraft.
Now, earlier you talked about, you gave us your personal opinion where you said you feel that the airports in Nigeria should not be affected whenever labor is going on strike. But of course, like we know, the strike has just been relaxed. It's very possible it might be picked up in a couple of days. So I'm just wondering how urgent or how important is it that the airports this time around is not affected if they do decide to go back on strike? Because I do recall Labour threatening to also picket the international airport.
Well, we hope that a resolution is arrived at, in their negotiations with government. I know that the Honorable Minister of Aviation, Festus Keyamo, cares deeply about consumer protection, which makes my job even easier. It's been one of his core KPIs, and he's always been available to the members of the public. I've never seen a minister who cares about consumer protection like Festus Keyamo, because a lot of the complaints that reach me come from passengers who are able to reach him directly. He takes calls any time of the day and night. And so because of this, I know that the Honorable Minister, the MD fan, and the DGCA, my DG, Captain Chris Najomo, are also impressing on the government on the need to protect our airports and ensure that these things do not happen. But this is subject also to the understanding, of the unions. But one hopes that with the relaxation of the strike action for a week, a resolution will be arrived before the end of the 1 week.
And what are
so hopefully this doesn't get to happen again.
We sincerely hope so, but of course we watch as things develop in Nigeria. What are some things that you would particularly want passengers to be aware of, especially at these times, in order to make your job and the jobs of other airport staff more safe and more comfortable for everyone around?
It's simple for me. Study the regulations. If you're a frequent traveler, you need to study the NCA regulations so that you know your rights, your responsibilities, and what is due you as compensation if necessary. Because when you want to go into private business, you carry out feasibility studies, you do your research before you go into that business, because you don't want to abdicate all of your roles and responsibilities to other people, because sometimes systems can fail. However, as a traveler, if you do not have an understanding of what the regulations are, you run into trouble a lot of times. If you do not arrive at the airport at the right time, the airline, by regulations, has a right to not allow you board. If you are unruly, for instance, if you speak rudely to airport personnel, if you destroy properties at the airport or on the plane, the airline has a right to disembark you from that aircraft. So no matter the provocation, passengers should try to never be unruly. The NCA is available, to help you resolve some of these issues no matter what. I'd like to let the public know that our NCAA consumer protection officers are available at every airport terminal in Nigeria. Perhaps we on our part need to, carry out more awareness to make more people aware. But you see, there's only so much awareness you can do. People need to also be willing, to find out information by themselves. If you have any problem at any terminal, just simply walk to the NCA Consumer Protection Office. If you do not know it, ask around. They are always there, and they can help you resolve these issues. Where they are not available to you physically, there is a phone number that we have put out there in our jingle for people to be able to call. If you permit me, I could read out this phone number here, and there are also emails as well that you can reach us by. And we are in constant communication with the airlines, in order to be able to resolve these cases as speedily as possible.
Well, Mr. Achimugu, just before we let you go, I'm wondering if there's anything that can be done about the long processing time, sometimes hours spent by passengers before they can complete all security checks. Is it possible to look into that and maybe shorten the time?
Yes. As a government official, I'll be lying if I said that everything at the airport was perfect. There's need to improve on some of the services, and thankfully the Honorable Minister, as he himself has said many times on television, is discussing with various companies who are trooping into Nigeria because of the positive economic climate, that has been created by the government, and they are offering their services, world-class companies. He has said it before that he's seeking the best among them, so as not to repeat the mistake of setting deals in the past that would not have favored Nigerians. As soon as some of these agreements are reached, some of these facilities will be seamlessly provided for. For instance, there's a need to get more scanning points, at departure areas, because sometimes one of the reasons for delay is when several airlines are flying within the same time period and all of their passengers need to pass through just one scanner. It causes a delay, which will not be the fault of the airline. It's one of those things that sometimes passengers don't get to see when they blame the airlines. But I'm confident that the Honorable Minister is on it, and very soon it will become a thing of the past.
All right, then, Michael Achimugu, thank you so much for joining us, the Director of the Public Affairs and Consumer Protection of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.